We are tonight's entertainment.
You can't handle the truth.
The fire rises.
Pizza time.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So it begins.
You know how much I sacrificed?
You think that's air you're breathing?
Groovy.
I don't have friends. I got family.
We are Sex People! 1, 2, 3, 4!
Craft Services.
Hey, Trent.
Hi, Parth.
Good to see you.
You too. How's it going, man? We have a film podcast.
We have a film podcast, but we have been personally apart for a while. I feel like we haven't recorded in so long.
But hey, you're looking well.
Thank you, Trent. We've been apart so long that I've not really been, keeping up to date with everything you've been eating. So, Trent, why don't you let me know? What have you been eating most recently?
Well, we're fresh off recording the interview that we just did.
Yes.
So that was pretty cool. But before that, I drank an Inshore. Do you know what that is?
Brother, my parents, or more specifically, let's just be real here, my mom would buy Ensure when I was a kid, and I would go through bouts of loving it and having like 2 a day, and my mom would be like, that's too much. And then sometimes I'd be like, this is giving me a weird feeling in my throat, and I don't want it anymore. And I would sort of ping pong between those two feelings. But Trent, I believe you must be more on the I love it side of things.
I, like you, as a kid, was for a time a bit addicted to Inshore. My mom would say that they're extremely expensive, and having bought them for myself now, like a 6-pack is like 16 or 20 bucks. Like, that's crazy.
Is it really?
Uh-huh.
That's ridiculous. Well, that's why you got to buy them from Costco.
Well, I don't have a Costco card because I'm not an adult like you. But I've gone to buying one at a time at the deli for $2 because it's even a better deal. But just for a meal replacement, sometimes I drink those. But one time as a kid, I would only get them when I was sick. And so my mom would be like, you can only have one Inshore today, because I would go crazy without these limitations.
Right.
And she had left. I was homesick for the day. And I took an additional Inshore and was drinking it. And then she came back home and I hid it like in my pants. And then I ran off to my room. And then I hid it like in a cabinet. And then a few months later, I'd forgotten about it. And then I found it again. And I was like, oh, great, my Inshore, I found it. And I go to drink it, and the Inshore hit me in the face, and it had become a solid item.
Oh.
That's my one rotten milk story. It involves an Inshore. But
great.
What are you up to, though?
What I ate most recently was a banana for breakfast right before we did the interview, but that's not the most interesting thing I've eaten recently.
I, too, opted for the more interesting option versus the reality of the situation, and we both pride ourselves on this being an honest segment of the show, whereas the rest of the segments of the show are filled with lies.
Exactly. But recently I met with Adam Volerich, host of the Eye of the Duck podcast, for which I do research, and we're starting to wrap up our Lord of the Rings series, Middle Earth, as we know it, will never be the same. And it's been a hard series, and so Adam Volerich purchased the cruise cake. For those uninitiated, Tom Cruise, come holiday time, flies a cake, a white chocolate coconut bundt cake from Doan's Bakery to all of his friends, I believe through via private jet, which is great for the environment. And the cake is known to be extremely delicious and very sweet. And Adam Volerich had purchased it for all of our hard work on the series. I had some yesterday, and it was delicious.
You had it for the first time ever.
First time ever. Ever, Trent.
And you said you ate so much you made yourself sick?
Yes, Adam Volerich asked me how big a slice I wanted, and I said, go big or go home. And as Trent and I were saying earlier before we started recording, I did both.
Good on you, kid. And then I wanted to try it. I was like, oh, that looks delicious. And Parth was like, there's a wait list, man. And I was like, oh, I'll go on the wait list. And Parth was like, it's months and $170. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll just like go to the grocery store or something.
And buy some cake.
Maybe Tom Cruise and I aren't in the same sort of like financial range when it comes to cake.
Really? You think so?
This is like when someone like sprayed a cologne I liked, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll go, like, that's cool, like, I'll go buy some. And then I went to the cologne store, and the smallest amount was like $300, and I was like,
Jesus.
I think I'm just not gonna be a person who wears
cologne like that?
or like who is able to afford cologne.
Well, Trent, I think you smell great.
Am I poor?
I mean, we've spoken about how I've loaned you money on the show before, so I don't feel bad bringing it up, but Trent, it's not looking good.
Cue the intro, I guess. Welcome back to Craft Services, where we talk about the movies. Each week we talk about a film and hopefully have a crew member of that film where they talk with us about their experience working on the picture. This week we have composer Jerskin Fendrix. He composed the music for a bunch of cool movies that we're about to intro, so I won't say it again, but like it was notably like Bugonia and like Yorgos Lanthimos' last two movies. And he was super cool. I like Bugonia a lot. Parth just watched it. Think he liked it too. Parth, you want to cut me off?
No, you seem like you're doing great.
Feel free to cut me off whenever.
No, yeah, thank you. Jerskin Fendrix was a very cool get. Was, I believe, our fourth composer on the show, which is always a little bit different and cool because we usually, we're getting a cinematographer, we're getting an editor, we're getting a production designer. It's sort of our bread and butter, as it were. But every now and then, you got to get some avocado on some toast. You know,
the composers are a really fun treat. I always have fun.
Yeah, and he was super cool, and I think the score for this movie is really interesting. While writing the questions, I was listening to the score, and it's always a cool experience to be able to do that.
And I told him he was a fun person to interview afterwards, because rarely in our interviews am I chuckling as much as I just chuckled for the past 35 minutes. He's a charming, witty gentleman.
Yeah, maybe this is part for part two, but we really bond over our love for Conan.
Yes.
And anyone that is a fan of Conan is a friend of mine. And a friend of the pod is a friend of yours, listener. So why don't we cue the interview? Hello, everybody, and welcome to our interview with Jerskin Fendrix. He's the composer behind films like Poor Things, Kinds of Kindness, and our film for today, Yorgos Lanthimos' Bugonia. Thank you so much for being with us today. Just to start off, could you talk about your background as a musician?
Sure. Yeah. I don't know if any of it's important. I played music when I was a little boy. I learned how to play the violin and the piano to a certain degree. And I listened to a lot of music in my house, went to church a lot. My parents were, especially my father, were, kind of clerics on the side. So like there was a lot of stuff. I don't know. And yeah, I guess I started writing stuff for the piano and for the violin when I was like a teenager, maybe a bit before. And I kept doing it. And I've never really been good at much else. So it ended up being an obvious career choice. And then, yeah, I studied music at university, didn't really enjoy it, was in a bunch of projects and stuff in London where I moved to. I was in a band called Famous. I had Jerskin Fendrix as the solo weird pop music kind of project. And then Yorgos Lanthimos, this Greek director, got in touch with me after we heard my album and asked me if I wanted to do some music for his films, and so on and so forth.
So moving to Bugonia, in an interview, you said Yorgos gave you the words bees, basement, and spaceship to work on for a year. Can you talk about what your immediate reaction was to that?
Yeah, we were at dinner with, Robbie, the cinematographer, was there, and a couple of other people, and I was, someone started talking about the next film, and then Yorgos told everyone to shut up because he didn't want me knowing anything about it, and he just gave me the 3 words then and told me I had a year to come up with an orchestral score based on those words. And so I was, smiled and thought it was funny in the front of my face, and at the back of my head, I immediately started panicking and trying to work out how to do that. I think sometime later in the dinner, Yorgos also mentioned that Emily was going to have her head shaved for it, and so he said the 4th word was Emily Bowles. And in recent interviews, he's insisted there are 4 words, and the 4th word is Emily Bowles. By the time he said that, I wasn't even listening to the conversation. I was just in the back of my head, just like, how do you write for orchestra, what am I meant to do here? Maybe I should read something about this, and those sorts of internal monologues.
Did you have a feeling? I mean, it seems like you were probably taken aback by that, but like once you were able to sort of come up with any idea, like did you have a feeling of what you wanted the score to sound like or feel like?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I think Yorgos didn't want me to read the script or know about the film or the film it's based on is to do with the fact that it's so much of it is just a conversation between three people in a house. And he knew that if he gave me the budget for a full 90-piece orchestra, the main thing that I would want out of it was for it to be as loud and big and as obnoxious as possible. And without any constraint of script, I could just do that to its fullest extent. And if I did have the script, I would have probably pared it back a bit to let, the actors and the story and all these kind of extraneous parts of the film have a bit of a spotlight. So, yeah, I knew I wanted to be pretty distasteful about it. I wanted to basically blow up the orchestra.
Did you try to establish a sort of anthem through reoccurring elements in the score?
Yeah, I usually suck at that. There's a theme that comes up at least twice, which is good for me, which is it starts in the piece basement with this kind of a minor key fanfare, the bum, 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 bum. At least that comes in at least once. And then like starts getting distorted and slowed down and chopped and screwed during the final History of Earth monologue that the fuller humanoid gives. So that was one theme. And I guess the Grand Cycle theme, which is just played anytime Teddy is on a bike and is very happy. And then there are different or more pleasant pieces of music that get played when Teddy's on a bike and he's not very happy.
Can you talk about when you have an idea in your head for you, just because there's very different methods you can go with, what is the physical process of like, are you writing score? Are you like just messing around and then piecing it all together? How does the score go from your head to like what it is finished in the movie? I believe you had a 90-piece orchestra in the final mix.
Yeah, which is way too big, actually. I didn't know how big you meant to get for a scoring orchestra. And I was asked very early on in the process just because they had to do so much budgeting and organization. And they said, like, I hadn't decided yet. I hadn't done any research. And they just asked me for a ballpark figure. So I said 90 or 100 or something. And then later on, I looked into it and turned it out I only really needed 40 or 50. Or like, that's what other big Hollywood orchestras kind of look like. At least the ones I was taking arrangement cues from. And by the time I was like, I probably just need 40 or 50, they'd already budgeted for 90. So I thought, great, I'll just use too many people. And I'm very glad because like when you play anything with 90 people, you can write pretty bad stuff and it sounds great just because of how loud it is. The process is variable. I sometimes spend time on the piano. I sometimes spend time on the computer messing with things with Logic and so on. A lot of the time it'll just be walking around or handwritten research like with these areas and kind of often when you're writing with something familiar like a piano or a DAW or the thing, it's very easy to fall into you write some bad stuff and then you get freaked out. So your body just defers back to what you're good at, which is certain chord sequences, certain hand positions, certain effects, certain compositional techniques. It runs the risk of you writing something from muscle memory rather than actually really, really specifically addressing and describing what you want to address and describe thematically. So it's great to imagine a piece of music without knowing whether you're capable of writing it or not. So I try and spend a lot of time just walking around or with a notebook. Yeah.
Are you told exactly where the director wants score, or do you have some input on that matter?
No, I basically write pretty much all of the music the film needs before shooting starts. Yorgos will play it on set, and then when it comes to editing, he'll choose exactly where it goes. Like he specifically doesn't. For both of us, it's really helpful to not write anything tailored to a certain scene. I'm not a director. I have no vision or ingenuity for this sort of thing. Sometimes, say in films where I get scripts, I'll think, it seems like there's a pretty violent scene here. Maybe I'll write a piece of music that's appropriate for a violent scene. And then it gets used in the most inappropriate possible scene. And that's how Yorgos does it. And it always works out great. I think that's fairly uncommon for composers. And it's such a huge privilege and weight off my shoulders to never have to compose to picture. It makes my job so much easier that it's almost, I think, unfair.
Mm-hmm. With the finished film, was there any scene where you were like maybe taken aback or surprised in the way it was used?
At this point, I'm kind of expecting that to happen. I think the most, which ended up, I think, probably is the most popular bit of music from the film, this piece called Grand Cycle, where Teddy's on the bike near the beginning. I remember seeing that for the first time and being like, this is a really, really bold combination. And it works. And I don't question it. Not just because I'm aware of the hierarchy of power. And I think those things are actually really helpful in making something as complicated as a film. But like, I always agree. And I really have that, I have such unconditional trust in Yorgos putting it in the place that he believes is best. I don't think it's helpful for me to comment. Yeah, it's just how he does it. It's great.
Once we get to the alien ship, that it's interesting that you basically have no involvement in that regard, just because the alien stuff, once we get to the ship, sounds so different. Was that score that you'd made, or was that sound? Because it's sort of difficult to tell like what exactly arrangement that is.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain bits where Johnny Byrne, who is the sound designer for these films, and we spent a lot of time together towards the end of the process. And he's, firstly, you've seen Zone of Interest and stuff like this. He's like the greatest sound designer alive. And secondly, he's so sympathetic and collaborative with, okay, this is a scene where we need to make the sound effects really hit the story and the score can come back a bit. And then this is a bit where he's going to strip out all of the sound effects so the score can really do the storytelling or whatever bit. So it's really fun working with him. The spaceship, there's some of his sound design there. I wrote quite a lot of synth music for this film as well, just because I got bored. And there's hours of this terrible, unusable synth music. But one of the pieces ended up, getting used for the transport section. So like a lot of these kind of like very glissandi-ing sine wave synthesizers and this kind of vocal synth I really like that goes like at the bottom end. I was pretty proud of that one. But yeah, some of it happens with Johnny as well. Like the opening scene, for example, with all the bees and the piece of music also called Bees. Johnny, there's like hundreds and hundreds of different bee recordings happening simultaneously. And Johnny went through precisely and tuned every single bee hum to make sure it was in harmony with one note of the piece of music at any given time. So like not like it's singing along, but it's like resonant frequency, which is like no other like that's such an insane thing to do. And yeah, that's the kind of thing Johnny does.
So 15 songs ended up being on the Bugonia original motion picture soundtrack. How many like pieces of work did you like submit for potential use?
I need to double check, but I did check the other day. As I said, there's like a bunch of just random synthesizer crap that's not been used. I'm pretty sure every orchestral piece I wrote in some form or another ended up in the film, which is a pretty good success rate.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty much true, yeah.
I'm always interested with like how involved composers are. Like if I'm playing the album on Spotify and like the track listing and the order and all that, like how involved have you gotten in that stuff with the release of your scores?
I mean, I'm reasonably in charge of having to put the album together. In my assistant, Will Carkey, and Fiona, who engineered the Air Studios recording sessions, also she mixed the album. So I get some help with it, but I'm pretty much left in charge. And this is, again, Yorgos is a great delegator. He's a great truster of people. He doesn't, I just double check with him at the end, but he basically just wants me to sort it out, which I do. With film scores, generally it's pretty helpful for them to be reasonably chronological, just because just so people can reference back to them. This one a bit less so, because a lot of the pieces, I wrote them as like long full orchestral movements, and then sometimes they've been cut up so one section appears a bit earlier than the second part of that piece might appear like 40 minutes later. So I wanted it to play a bit, and also so many film score soundtracks have like a lot of pieces that are only 20, 30 seconds long for a little bit of incidental, whatever. I wanted it to play a bit more like an orchestral, like a Tchaikovsky or a Stravinsky or whatever, like a full orchestral suite, so that it's not exactly in chronological order, but it's sort of there.
What's your thinking towards picking track names? Just looking at them, they seem pretty literal and minimalist.
Yeah, I mean, most of them aren't the original track names, mainly because I didn't know what the characters were and stuff. So we have code names for tracks. One thing is that when Yorgos reminded me of the Emily Bold keyword, a lot of the pieces ended up just being called Emily, then insert name of famous bold person from history. So you got like Emily Gandhi, Emily Lenin, Emily Mussolini, all these guys. Usually, like when I'm sending the pieces to Yorgos, I basically try I couldn't with this film anyway, but with the last two, like give them names that are not, doesn't really tie them to a specific character or tie them to a specific scene, just so it doesn't influence where he thinks the piece should go. And just so you can, but so they can be memorable enough that you can refer to them like as an album of songs, basically. And then for the sake of the soundtrack, it's, you know, some of the original names, like Resurrectionem and Phantom Resurrectionem were the original pieces of the original names of the pieces, and this is based on ideas around bees and Bugonia and that kind of ritual. I don't really know. Sometimes it's helpful for the name of the piece just to be what happened in the film, and sometimes you want something that evokes like something slightly more abstract. Yeah.
Did you have like direct inspirations, whether other composers, soundtracks, or just, you know, pieces of music that you were referring to, or were you trying to, as best as possible, work in a vacuum?
I mean, I looked at, I think there are some fairly easily hearable influences, especially from early 20th century Romantic composers like Holst and Mahler and Sibelius and Stravinsky and all these kind of people, partly just to do with like what's an interesting way of using the orchestra as a weapon. One big thing as well was we wanting to record the entire orchestra in a single room, which is very common for, again, these like classic recordings. I listened to so much Bernstein and Stokowski and all of these, you know, big classical conductors where it would either have been recorded in a concert hall live or in a recording studio, but the whole point of the piece is that the balance worked so you can hear them at the same time. It's very common in film scoring to do things like striping or stemming, where you record all the brass and all the strings and all the percussion separately, so you can get them playing in a way that wouldn't really work live. Like if you had, you know, in so many film scores, if you actually had the strings and the brass playing that in the same room, the brass would just completely devour the strings, and then the percussion would completely devour the brass. And I didn't want it to sound like a kind of very produced, very striped contemporary orchestral score. I really wanted it to have that, like, yeah, Bernstein-y, Karajan-y kind of feel of like a classic, big, romantic orchestral recording. And that also means altering the way you compose and arrange it to make sure that, yeah, the certain instruments aren't going to drown out other ones, or you get space. So it's a nice way of disciplining yourself as well. John Williams obviously is a very good example of a film scorer who still sounds like it has this really early 20th century romantic feel to a lot of the ways he approaches his orchestral scores. So that was a touch point too.
Part that was fun.
That was great, if incomplete.
Yeah, no, like it was great, but like it's no part two.
No, it's you know, part one is part.
It's part done. It
part,
was
part done. Yeah,
it was part fun.
But part two is part glue that holds it all together.
If you thought part one was good, then you're fucking stupid.
Oh,
and part two is gonna blow your fucking head off.
You know, I've been thinking of ways to increase audience engagement, and I think openly antagonizing them after they've finished one of your episodes might be the way to go. So I'm really glad that that's what we're doing. But yeah, like you kind of are like a numbskull if you listen to this and thought it was the good part.
Only because of how good next week is going to be. I'm not trying to be an asshole.
No, Trent,
but
you'd never be an asshole.
We have been trying, like usually at the end of episodes we're like, here's where you can listen to us. Blah, blah, blah. We're plugging all our shit. We're vamping. We've been approaching it in like the standard way, and it hasn't really been working. So like, let's go the other direction.
Right.
And we're like, if you listen to this, you're fucking dumb. Turn this off now.
Right.
And I think in like a reverse psychology.
Well, it's like, you know how in rom-coms from like the early 2000s where it's like, I'm a nerdy guy. And then he gets advice from like the cool girl for some reason. And she's like, you're too nice. You gotta fucking be mean. You gotta be a piece of shit to girls. That's how they'll get you. And it works. And you know, if it works in the movies, maybe it works in real life. I mean, Trent, you and I, we're handsome, dashing men. Are we not? Or are we just nerds? I guess that's what we've learned, is that we're nerds and we need to be mean to the audience.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Glad that we've placed ourselves in such a situation.
Wait, but just like, thanks to our guest.
Yeah.
His name.
Wow, this really fucking went off the rails. Thank you to our guest, Jerskin Fendrix, for coming on the show. We hope our candor does not, you don't feel like that reflects poorly on your work, which is awesome. Really great work on the Bugonia score, and we are really excited for the audience to listen to part 2. We should just put that out there. But yeah, Trent, are we rooting for him at the Oscars?
We have a few people to root for at the Oscars this year. Let's plug our plugs. We've got Jerskin Fendrix up for Best Original Score.
Got Autumn Durald Arkapaw for Best Cinematography for Sinners.
And then for Hamnet, we've got Fiona Crombie for production design.
Yeah, so we got 3 people that for sure were like, they gotta win.
So like on DraftKings, go into DraftKings and bet, like there should be like, you know, those like pre-made bets. It'll be it'll be called the Craft Services Trio.
Wow.
And the odds are really good because you actually can gamble on these things now.
Yeah, it's great. All the regulations are gone, and a whole generation of young men are
addicted.
lured in. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Sponsored by Polymarket.
Yeah. Plus 1,600 for the Craft Services Trio. You know, bathrobes for everyone if that hits.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm borrowing as much money as I can get from Parth.
Oh.
And I'm putting it, that's where my money's going. But I'm going to be like, Parth, I need some money from groceries. I'm so hungry. I'm sick. I need medicine. And then I'm going to bet on the Craft Services Parlay Trio.
And then ask for more money.
This is unironically something you could do. You could actually bet on the Craft Services Parlay Trio.
I know, but who's going to do that? I guess we should do it. We should put our money where our mouth is.
Like, what if we took all our, like the money we're comfortable spending on the podcast, and we're like, we're about to make or break this podcast.
Wow.
If it hits, we put this into advertising, we really take off, and if it doesn't, we cut our losses. And it's
and just end it, and we're stuck with 2 microphones and various audio recording equipment.
We sell that on eBay.
It's true. They hold their value.
I thought you were raising a Parth raised his hand up to adjust his microphone, but I thought he was raising a fist in solidarity to Mike's holding their value.
That's pretty good.
But yeah, I think we were both pretty chuckly during this interview because our guest was very funny and witty,
cool guy,
and charming. And he's a cool guy who composes some cool music
movies,
and for cool movies, and he makes his own original music. He seems pretty dope, so maybe I'll check that out. Yeah, and he's like 30 or 31 or something.
That's the worst thing of it all.
He's probably the youngest person we've ever interviewed.
You think? Yeah, if not the youngest, one of the youngest. It is weird. We're usually, I feel like because we started this podcast as but we lads, I think we were 19 when we started. We still, I think, intellectually come at it from that angle of like, we're nobodies, we're kids interviewing like industry giants is sort of the mentality we go in with. And now we're rapidly aging and reaching the age of people that are actually going out there and doing things like worth talking about. And we're just here behind a mic. But if we weren't here, who would even be there to sing their praises when you think about it?
You know what they say, if you can't do podcast.
So they couldn't do what we did.
If you can't make a film, start a podcast about film. Done and done.
Done and done. All right, Trent, where can the listeners hear our episodes?
Well, just go ahead over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, frankly, wherever you get your podcasts. Our episodes come out Sundays at 5 a.m. Bright and early. Set your alarms, 4:45. Be ready. Shout out producer Bash, doing big things behind the scenes.
He is doing big things behind the scenes, and that sort of pertains to our release, where these episodes get released. Because, folks, for a long time, we've been saying Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, but we've been missing a big one. Probably the biggest platform for video that exists, YouTube, which is where podcasts go now for some reason. But we on our own, we're not able to get our episodes up on YouTube. But things have changed. Things have been set into motion that can now not be undone. Producer Bash has gotten our episodes slowly releasing on YouTube. And if you're a craft services fanatic and you want to hear all of our horrible old episodes, those are currently being uploaded. And Bash has predicted that within a month, the episodes will be current and we will be on YouTube for your listening pleasure.
Yes, but currently you can listen to everything from our first episode ever, Star Wars The Force Awakens, through like a few months later when we talked to Sorry to Bother You cinematographer Doug Emmett. And we talked about a few John Wick movies. Actually, we have some good guests even early on. But
pretty early on, we had good guests, but I really cringe at the thought of here. It's not the guests that's the problem.
It's not your fault. It's not your fault. No, but I listened. I was like, cool, our episodes are on YouTube. Thanks, Parth. Thanks, Bash. And I listened to 2 seconds, and I was like, I heard my own voice from 6 years ago, and it was a punch in the face.
I know. Trent, this year it's going to be 6 years come June.
That's a punch in the face. Am I old and poor?
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.